Why did you eventually join the Church of Satan?
Well, I had been introduced to the Satanic Bible by this friend of mine who owned an occult bookstore in Milwaukee. And originally, of course, witches are always told, well, we aren't Satanists, the Church of Satan is evil and all that. But as I read it, I realized that basically the magical concepts in the book were pretty similar to the magical concepts that were taught by Wicca, except they were more honest and more open about what the true source of the power was. And it's like a gradual thing of seduction. You start out and then you read a little bit and then you kind of get deceived and you read a little bit more. And it's kind of like, you let the nose of the camel in the tent, before you know it, the whole camel's in the tent. And the Church of Satan I contacted them, and they said, well, we'll send you our newsletter and you'll learn a whole lot more than what is just in these two books. Because that time he had two books out. He had the Complete Witch and the Satanic Bible. So anyway, I basically joined it because I was on a quest for more knowledge.
What does it take to be a Satanist?
Well, in terms of the Church of Satan, all it takes is, you fill a little application form and send them your whatever. I don't know what it is now. I think it was $25 when I joined up, and then you get this little red membership card with black print that says you're a member of the infernal kingdom of hell, and it's got the goat's head and the inverted pentagram and everything on it. And then basically you just study stuff, and if you want to go forward, then you have to fill out a very detailed questionnaire. And if they deem you, quote-unquote, worthy, then you become a second-degree member of the Church of Satan, which is called, in the case of a male, it's called a warlock. But otherwise, if you want to know about the higher-level satanic stuff, then it's a lot more complicated. Thank you.
And did you tell the lower-level witches that you joined the Church of Satan?
No, because we felt they weren't ready for that information. It's kind of like the layers of an onion. The very essence of any, again, remember, occult means hidden. So the very essence of any occult society is that the people on the outside are not allowed to know what's going on the inside, and the people on the inside are not allowed to know what's going on the real inside. And it just keeps, getting in further and further until you get to the heart of the artichoke.
What are the different levels of being a Satanist?
Well, again, I never got higher in the Church of Satan than a warlock, but I know that I realized fairly soon that they were more or less dabbling around the fringes. See, the Church of Satan is kind of regarded as window dressing. It's like a PR thing, and it's a way of drawing in what Anton LaVey called the rubes. See, Anton LaVey was a former carnival huckster. He played the calliope in the circus and played organ for strippers and stuff like that in the carnival. And so he had a very carnival mentality. And I don't know if you know anything about carnival people, but they call the people that are the marks, They call them rubes. And so the Church of Satan was basically a way of drawing in the rubes. And then those who really had the fire for more, they wanted really to get more stuff, then they would somehow or other be led to a more serious organization. And in my case, I first of all got involved, I heard through the grapevine, so to speak, because of course there was no internet back in the 70s, about an organization in Michigan called the Order of the Black Ram. And I got involved with them, and then from there I was introduced to the Brotherhood, which is the hardcore satanic organization. They have basically 10 levels of initiation. And the highest level is called Ipsissimus, which means the very most selfish of self.
Oh, nice.
And it basically means you're a living God. You're a living God upon the earth. I never got that high, sorry to say.
Okay.
But anyway, so basically in hardcore Satanism, there's 10 levels. And I got up to level 8.
Okay, thank you. You say you became a satanic priest. What did you have to do to become that?
Well, first of all, I had to be a Catholic priest, but that was already kind of halfway taken care of. And then in order to be ordained in the Satanic Priesthood in the Brotherhood, I had to, finally the big moment, I had to sell my soul to the devil. And there was this, it was really very strange, because there was this beautiful park in a city in suburban Illinois, which I was told was basically owned by the Brotherhood. The whole city was totally controlled by the Brotherhood. They had a huge mansion there of a very, very wealthy, if I said the name, it's a major industrial force in America that were Satanists, and they gave this mansion over to satanic rituals. And additionally, this park, which was a fully public park, broad daylight, it was full of Egyptian statuary, and they had this giant trapezoidal altar in the center of the park. And you know, everywhere you looked were these satanic-looking Egyptian statues and weird statues. And, you know, it was a public park. This is the strangest thing, and I've gone through a lot of strange things in my day. But here it was broad daylight, beautiful sunny summer day, and I was led down this path, and I think it was the police. There were police cars going all around the park, keeping people out. And
for
I was
ritual?
led up to the, for my ritual.
Wow.
And I was led up to this altar, and there I had to prick my thumb and sign my name in the black book and sell my soul to the devil. And for 7 years, he was going to own me, body, soul, and spirit, and I would serve him. And at the end of those 7 years, he would get to kill me and take me to hell. But in the meantime, I could have everything I wanted: wine, women, song, wealth, whatever.
Wouldn't you be a bit worried about the next 7 years?
Well, first of all, I knew if I was a really good boy, I could renew my contract, kind of like a pro football player, you know. But beyond that, see, we were taught that hell was like this non-stop orgy of sex, drugs, rock and roll for all eternity. And that basically what the cosmology, if you will, of hardcore, see, like the Church of Satan doesn't even believe in heaven and hell. They believe that you make your own heaven or your own hell here in this life. Officially, that's their teaching. Because the Church of Satan doesn't believe in Satan. They just believe Satan is like an archetype, a kind of a role play, ritualized, dramatic figure that you use as a symbol in psychodrama, okay? But hardcore Satanists do believe in a heaven and a hell, and we were taught that hell is basically the place for masters, for those who are little gods that bestride the earth, and that heaven is for the slaves, for the sheep, because heaven is boring. All you do is sit on a cloud and twang away on a harp for all eternity. Whereas down in hell, you get to have orgies and get drunk and have, you know, lots of drugs and everything for all eternity.
I see. So how long were you a satanic priest?
Well, let me think. No one's ever actually asked that question. Probably about 2 years.
Okay, and what did you do?
Well, there's certain high satanic holidays, including every Friday night at midnight, where you celebrate the Satanic Mass, and plus we would do various rituals. See, I was a Satanist who was involved in the religion of Thelema as well, Aleister Crowley's New Aeon religion. So we celebrated what is called the Gnostic Mass. We did all sorts of other rituals. I mean, we wrote some of our own rituals. In fact, as you're encouraged to do that, it's kind of magical creativity. But basically, we would do rituals like on the high festival days, and we'd do black masses on the Friday night at midnight thing. And then if there was a need of some sort of initiation, because there's just like there's baptism in the Christian religion, well, there's initiations in Satanism too, on a lower level than the priesthood.
Did other people come to your masses?
A handful. I mean, for one thing, we never advertised this. I mean, you know, except nowhere except maybe somewhere like San Francisco would you advertise, oh, we're having a satanic mass, at midnight, So no, but some of our covenants, maybe 5 or 10 at most of our covenants would and, just like any church service, some would come, some wouldn't from week to week, but the ones that were high enough up to know that we were doing these things, yes, they would come.
Okay, thank you. Could you give me a history of the Church of Satan and the other branches of Satanism?
Well, the Church of Satan officially started in 1966, and Anton LaVey in that year shaved his head and proclaimed that was year one of Anno Satanas. And like we have Anno Domini, AD for the year of our Lord, well, he said that 1966 was year one. And so to this day, if you get the Church of Satan newsletter, which is called the Cloven Hoof, the dates on it like this would be 39, Anno AS 39, because this is the 39th year of the Church of Satan. And basically, he started as a kind of a study group, and then started branching out because he's very much a theatrical showman kind of guy with his carnival background, and he'd walk around the street. He painted his house on California. Have you ever heard that song, The House on California Street, by some rock band? That refers to the Church of Satan, because it was originally a black, it was a whole Victorian house that he painted pitch black on California Street. And he'd walk around with black trench coats and a big slouch fedora hat, and he'd walk a leopard. Or he actually had a black Nubian lion because he had been a lion tamer at one time. So again, very theatrical, very showman-like. And he'd started celebrating these public satanic masses where he'd have a naked girl laying on the fireplace in the main room of his thing, and he'd do these satanic masses, black masses, and he got a lot of members in the late 60s and the early 70s. Was immensely popular. He had people from Jane Mansfield, who some of them may recall as being kind of a sex goddess, and in the movies, and he had Sammy Davis Jr. was a member of the Church of Satan. He even had, one of his members was a Green Beret, and he got killed in Vietnam, and so LaVey got to do the first military funeral in Arlington Cemetery for a Satanist.
Wow. And
he also did the first satanic baptism of his daughter Zena, and gathered a lot of publicity. He got tarnished a little by what happened with Jane Mansfield's death, because Jane Mansfield's agent felt that her involvement with the Church of Satan would hurt her publicity, her career in Hollywood, and because she actually would pose. Like there's this one famous picture of her where she's in this kind of voluptuous, sexy gown, and she's kneeling at LaVey's feet, drinking out of this huge goblet. Very satanic-looking goblet. And he said, well, this is hurting your career. And so LaVey told him to stop messing with his relationship with Mansfield, and he wouldn't stop, and so LaVey put a curse on him. And he told him, you better watch it because you're going to be beheaded. And he warned Jane Mansfield to stay away from him, because he says, once you send a malignant bolt of energy out there, there's no way to control it. And if you're anywhere near this creep, might get it too. Well, just a few weeks later, they were driving along some California highway, and a semi came along and hit them head on, and the hood of the car just came through and decapitated them both, just like a guillotine. And the press asked him, well, do you regret doing it? And he says, well, no, I don't, because he deserved to die, and I warned her to stay away from him, and she didn't. Oh wow, So, and that's a typical example of satanic ethics, anyhow, but the membership started waning off, and really now there was a certain upsurge of it in the 80s with a kind of Satanism thing going on, but they don't ever have more than 2,000 or 3,000 members worldwide. It's not a very big organization. But then the other, see, again, they're just the outer branch. Now, what happened, I think it was in the 70s, is that LaVey's right-hand man, who is much more dangerous, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino, he broke away. He was like, the second in command of the whole Church of Satan. He broke away because he did believe that there was a real devil. He did believe there was a real dark God. And he felt LaVey was just sort of, what word should I use, sort of prostituting the whole thing. And so he started his own organization called the Temple of Set. And of course, Set is the name of the Egyptian version of the devil. And Aquino, who's a very intelligent guy, he's got like a PhD in political science, and he was, I don't know if he still is, like very high up in military intelligence in the U.S. Army. He said that Set, the devil, whatever, represents the principle of spiritual alienation. That the reason why man or woman, for that matter, feels alone, feels alienated from the rest of nature. We feel like we're not really part of nature and we're really not part of the universe. And that's okay, because we are apart from the universe. We are a superior being. We're a God in the making. And he believed that he was like kind of a John the Baptist to the coming of Set. And he even went to Wewelsburg Castle, which was bombed into ruins during World War II. It was in Bavaria, and Wewelsburg was the temple of the SS. So it was the black spiritual heart of Nazism. And he went there because he liked the energy. And this Aquino went to Wewelsburg Castle and did a ritual, he called it the calling forth by night. And he actually invoked the same dark god that Aleister Crowley invoked a generation earlier, named Iwas. And Iwas was basically the spiritual avatar of Satan. And supposedly at that time this Aquino was anointed to be kind of like the spokesman for Set. And really right now the Temple of Set is doing a lot more dynamic, if I may use that word, stuff in terms of satanic theology, if one may use the word, than is the Church of Satan. Then of course there's the Brotherhood, which is behind both of them. And the Brotherhood is an organization. It's basically operates out of Trieste, Italy. It's the hardcore satanic group that covers really the whole world. There's leaders of it in America. There's leaders of it in Latin America and virtually every continent. So that's this 10-tier organization. And the major centers of it in America are in New York, in Los Angeles, in Chicago, and also in Vancouver, British Columbia, are the major nerve centers of it.
Thank you. What are some of the other things that they're taught in Satanism? Well,
excuse me, I mentioned their kind of, if you will, their eschatology. They believe that the devil is going to dethrone the true God. They believe that there will be an Armageddon-like battle in which he will come and use all of the lost souls that are under his power, the millions of people on earth and the millions of people that are in hell, and he will invade heaven and he will bring down the kingdom of Yahweh, and he will set up his throne again and rule the universe. That's their kind of apocalyptic vision. And they believe that for the last 2,000 years, Jesus has been tormented in hell by demons. They believe he did not rise from the dead. And basically they hate Jesus with all their might. And they believe originally that, this is kind of hard to explain, they believe that originally that God and the devil made a deal. And that all the people who were mighty and who were masters and who were giants on the earth, so to speak, not literally giants, but great men and women, that they would get to go to hell. and that all of the losers and peons would get to go to heaven. But what wasn't in the bargain is that Satan's reputation would be vilified. And so he got mad because he was getting all of this negative press from, God's press people. And so there was this rebellion in heaven. And that's kind of the strange theology behind all this, is the idea that somehow God stabs Satan in the back and he wants his kingdom back.
That's really what people do when they do something bad to you. They'll turn around and turn the story back at you.
Oh, of course, sure. And of course, Satan is the ultimate egomaniac. I mean, he was, as we said earlier, the greatest of all of Yahweh's angelic beings, and yet he got lifted up in his pride and thought he could become exactly like God. And of course, that's not possible.
Why do they hate Jesus so much?
Well, partly because he represents everything they hate. He represents gentleness, and they value strength. Not that Yeshua isn't strong, he is, but I mean, the typical, I'll never forget what I think it was Ben Kinchlow said. He said that as a young man who was in prison, he never wanted to have anything to do with Jesus as he was popularly portrayed, because he said he seemed like this wimpy-looking guy that hung out with sheep and wore a dress. That's the popular conception of Jesus, that he's sort of wimpy, the gentle Jesus, meek and mild kind of thing. And people forget that the same Yeshua who preached the Sermon on the Mount, who fed the 5,000 with loaves and fishes, is also the same Yeshua who's going to be coming and who's going to crack the skies, and that the heavens and the earth are going to roll back like a scroll, and he's going to come down and blow away a 200 million man army with one word out of his mouth. But see, people don't like to say that. They don't like to think about that. They like their nice little cuddly, safe Jesus. They don't like this. They like the lamb. They don't like the lion of the tribe of Judah. So anyway, I'm starting to preach here. But the point is that they just everything that Jesus represents self-sacrifice to the Satanists, and they don't believe in that. They believe in doing everything for yourself. And also this whole idea of loving your enemy, doing good. They say, smite your enemy on the cheek, smite him hip and thigh with a sore slaughter, that he might go away and know that he should not attack a great master such as you are. They talk about knocking their teeth out and everything. I mean, it's the total inversion. And of course, that's the word Satan, ha-satan in Hebrew, means the adversary. So whatever Yahweh is, Satan isn't. It's like, this. So Satanism is designed to be a mirror image of Christianity, where Christianity zags, it zigs. And so where Christianity is kind and gentle and has hospitals for the sick and elderly, Satanism advocates just killing the worthless bunch of them, Where, Christianity advocates, turning the other cheek. They say smite them on both cheeks, that kind of thing.
What other lies are they told?
Well, obviously they're told at one point in the Satanic Bible, which even hardcore, I personally believe the Satanic Bible was actually channeled by LaVey, and actually is the words of Satan, at least in part, just because I believe, heard the voice of Satan on a few occasions, and it's very much in his character. And he says at one point, you do not need a redeemer. Say to thyself, I am mine own redeemer. And, in another place it says, behold the crucifix. What does it symbolize? Pallid incompetence hanging on a tree. And another place it says, I take my axe and I split open the worm-eaten skull of Jehovah, and I spit in his rheumy blind eye. I mean, just really nasty stuff, about the Almighty. And they're taught basically that there's nothing, that you're kind of like walking as a master upon the earth, and that some people, if they don't get out of your way, they can be killed. Now, they will be very careful to say, not literally go out and, like blow them away with a 444 Magnum or something. But you are allowed in Satanism. They have 3 rituals. They have a ritual of lust in the Satanic Bible, and a ritual of compassion, and a ritual of destruction. And you do the ritual of lust if you want to seduce someone. It doesn't matter which sex. You do the ritual of compassion if you want to heal someone or sort of bless someone. Oh, I hesitate to use that word in this context. Finally, the ritual of destruction is just what it sounds like. You throw a curse, and it's a nasty ritual. If you read the thing, it's one of the rituals. I talked earlier about how he tried to curse this lady who was a Christian lady, and it just kind of bounced off her. But I mean, just nasty stuff. It has lines in it like, we ask that the voiceless bird of nothingness would feed upon this person's rotten, putrid brain, and just all of this really bizarre. And you're supposed to sit there. They actually say in the Satanic Bible, you're supposed to sit there and work yourself up into just a blind, berserker, furious rage. Because again, the 3 keys of magic are essentially to be in a certain relaxed mental state, to visualize what you want, and then to put the emotional content, the desire behind it. In its most basic form, you can throw out all the trappings, all the little bells and candles and pentagrams. Those are the 3 things you have to do, and that's what's called mental magic. And so Satanism teaches that if you're going to kill, like what LaVey did with this guy, you just throw out this build of energy with all the hatred, all of the venom, all of the vitriol you can possibly imagine, and it's going to just go out there like a psychic bomb on the nuclear, I should say a nuclear bomb on a psychic plane. So they're also, of course, told that, again, that there is no real God, there is no hell, there is no heaven in regular Satanism, in the Church of Satan. They're taught also a kind of Ayn Rand-like objectivist ethics, in other words, where radical selfishness, where everything amounts to me, and if there's nothing in it for me, I won't do it. Things like that. I'm trying to think what other lies they're taught. You might as well just say they're taught everything exactly the opposite of what even conventional society teaches.
Right.
Right. So if you're taught to love your neighbor, they say, well, if your neighbor's worth loving, maybe you love him, especially if they're cute and attractive, you can get them in the sack. But if they're not, then, despise them, or at least ignore them.
Right. How is it that people become more and more entrenched in the Church of Satan and all these different levels? What is the thing that actually...
Well, it's a spiritual bondage. Once you put your foot... Now, you see, that's the funny thing. Anton LaVey never asked you to sell your soul to the devil. He says in some of his writings, it's the Christians that want souls. Satan isn't interested in souls. Of course, that isn't true, but so the Church of Satan never does that. You will never get a letter from them saying, okay, now it's time for you to sell your soul to the devil. They wait until you get higher up to do that. But again, once you swear allegiance in some way or another to the devil knowingly, it just blows open all the doors of hell in your life, and it's like you're standing there like spiritually naked saying, okay, come in. And I even remember literally kneeling before our satanic altar and begging demons to come into me, because I believed that the demons would give me more and more magical power. So at first for me it was a quest for knowledge, but then it ultimately became also a quest for power. But at the same time, see, this is the paradox. I believe that by doing this, I would be helping people. I believe that I would have the power to heal people, to make money out of thin air so that I could help my friends and my family. I believe that I would have the power to almost become kind of because one of the suggested readings in the Church of Satan is the philosopher Nietzsche. The idea of man and Superman. And of course, Nietzsche is the philosopher who said God is dead. And he's also the philosopher who said that the church is the grave of God. And if you want to smell God's rotting corpse, go into a church.
But he was talking about Catholicism, wouldn't
He was talking about any form of Christianity. He just hated Christianity in general, and so that's naturally why the Satanist church likes him. So, you know, we were taught this kind of idea that we would become like a Superman almost on here, not literally flying around in a red cape and blue tights, but having all these mighty powers and being able to help people. And that's what I thought I was on my road to.
Did you know any people that were like that?
Well, and I don't want to get ahead of my story here, so to speak, but as I got involved in Illuminati, I met people who did seem to have pretty miraculous powers. Nothing as spectacular as that, but yes, I did.
And how did their lives end up getting better and better?
Well, they ended up dead, but of course, don't we all? And just, you know, the difference is what kind of retirement plan do you have after you die?
Right.
But in fact, no. Most of the people we knew that were in Satanism, their lives were pretty miserable. Suicides, and of course, again, the Satanists would have no problem with suicide. They would say, well, if your life stinks at this particular time, you know, fine, you know, put a bullet through your head, you know, because if you can't, see, Satanists do believe in having fun and having, you know, some sort of, they say joy, but I don't really think joy and Satan ever can be in the same sentence together. But they would say if you're not enjoying your life, then you're probably a worthless piece of trash and just go out and put your head in an oven, you know. Okay. I mean, the idea of compassion is utterly alien to these people. You know, there are no Satanist orphanages or Satanist soup kitchens for the poor and needy, you know.
What about for their own children?
What do you mean?
Well, children are weak and at that time, so...
Well, they believe, I mean, LaVey has gone on record as saying, because when the Satanist thing started up with the, like the Geraldo special and some of these other things back in the late 80s, they felt they had to come out with a public statement, and they say, well, Satanists do not abuse children. We regard children as one of nature's greatest gifts. We believe that all children are by nature the truest Satanists. They actually said that because all children are eminently selfish. They think they are the center of the. I mean, and psychologically, we understand this is more or less true. That they think they're the center of the universe, and you know, and they say that basically the way children are at the age of 2 is the way everybody should be. You know, I want what I want when I want it, and if I don't get it, I'm going to kill someone. I mean, babies don't say that because, you know, they aren't able to really do anything. But so they do believe that, you know, obviously for their own children, they would have, you know, regard, and they would try and raise them according to their best sense of what was right and wrong. Because even Satanists have some sort of ethics, you know, it's just that it's so weird and twisted and pragmatic. But I would dare say that they would certainly have no problem like having an abortion, and they would probably be in favor of, like, if they have like a child that has some sort of a handicap, like, you know, Down syndrome or something, just kill the thing, you know. They don't believe in having worthless eaters around.
Right. Where do Satanists perform their rituals?
Well, we did ours in our home. We had a special, boy, that home. Back in Milwaukee, I mean, I feel sorry for whoever moved into that home after we were in it. But the funny thing is, the person who moved into that home after we did died of cancer within 3 months.
Wow.
And it was because that house that we lived in was a haunted house. And it tried to kill, especially Sharon, on numerous occasions, but Sharon was better than it was, more powerful, more savvy. One time it blew up the furnace right in her face. And, you know, just little things like that. You know, you want to talk about the Amityville horror, well, this house had nothing on that. Or that had nothing on this house. But we had this chapel where we did Gnostic masses and vampire masses and Catholic masses and Gnostic masses and Satanic masses. I mean, you name it, we did it. Oh yeah, in fact, every room. This is this big old blue house on Michigan Avenue in downtown Milwaukee. Looks like a giant blue barn. We didn't paint it. Our landlord did. And every room in that house was given over to the occult except for the living room and the kitchen. We slept in a closet, literally. And we had about 5 or 6 different temples and chapels in there. And our whole lives were dedicated to this.
Wow.
We were radically sold out to this stuff. So, I don't know how I got off on that
asking
tangent.
where
You see,
other
some
Satanists-
Satanists do things outdoors because kind of like witches, they believe in the power of nature. So, like, for example, the ceremony I discussed where I sold my soul to the devil, that was done in a park. Sometimes a lot of Satanists will say if they can, they like to do rituals either on a crossroads where there's running water, or else by the ocean, or by a lake. Like when we could, we'd try and do rituals by Lake Michigan. Some of the real, like for example, there are some places where if you're in the right place at the right time and you're a Satanist, you can go to a mansion of the very wealthy and powerful. The closest I can tell people is there's this very kind of weird evil movie. It was the last film of Stanley Kubrick called Eyes Wide Shut. And it basically gives a very real example of a satanic ritual.
Yes, I think a lot of people didn't realize what they were seeing in that.
Yeah.
They thought it was an orgy, but it didn't look like an orgy.
No, well,
Can you explain a bit more about that movie?
Yeah, well, and I don't know, because oddly enough, Kubrick is an atheist, was an atheist, a Jewish atheist, by the way, which is sort of unnerving. But he, I don't know really what he was trying to do with the movie. I know there was this book by, I think, a German writer called Trauman novel, I think the name of it was, a dream story. And he wanted to make that movie for years, and basically, I mean, the middle of the movie involves that this doctor ends up being able to get into this very exclusive party where there's all these, ritual, like this guy's sitting in a throne, and there's all these naked girls running around with masks on, and they kneel in a circle, and there's incense, and there's chanting, and then everybody goes off and starts, fornicating like crazy, and
but in a very ritualized way.
A very ritualized way, and see.
Is that what happens?
Well, in some cases, yes, because it depends on what kind of ritual you're doing. But it's believed in almost all these different occult groups that part of the function of this is raising power. And then there's the element of desire. Now, the strongest desire that any human being can experience is sexual desire. I mean, even more than a desire for food. And so the idea is that, okay, we're going to like reify or imagine that we want such and such a thing. And then we're in a regular white witchcraft circle. Everybody would like imagine this, and they'd start dancing, and they'd dance around real fast in a circle, and there'd be this chanting going on, and their auras would start blending together into this vortex of energy, and it would start rising and rising and rising and rising into what's called a cone of power. And then finally, when the high priestess felt as though that energy was as high as it was going to get, she would shout out "Harahya," and they'd fire off this cone of energy toward like if they were going to heal someone or whatever the case might be. Well, in Satanism, it's kind of the same thing, but it's like, again, the gloves are off. And so the idea is, okay, we're going to, if everybody's out there, fornicating their brains out and doing whatever other things, and there might be, like flagellation going on, there might be torture going on, whatever it takes to raise the energy. And of course, in a hardcore satanic group, that wouldn't see that they believe the two best ways to raise energy for a satanic ritual are either the sexual act or by murdering something, either an animal or a person. And that, because of course if you kill even an animal, an enormous amount of energy is released, because the animal's terrified, and so there's just a lot of energy released. And with a human being, there's even more energy released. And they believe, especially the most, and again, of course, the Church of Satan and the Temple of Set will deny they ever do these things. But I was told when I was in the organization that part of the reason LeVay kept lions in his basement is a good way of getting rid of the bodies.
Wow.
You just feed them to the lions, it saves on your meat budget. And so, in fact, they ultimately made him get rid of the lions because, have you ever heard a lion roar? It'd wake up the whole neighborhood. Right. And so finally the San Francisco, City of San Francisco Health Department made him get rid of the lion. He had to donate it to a zoo. But the hardcore Satanists would be able to, would think, okay, if it's ideally, sexual orgies are good because of course they're fun, but But if you really want to raise the ultimate kind of power, you have to sacrifice someone. The first is a baby, because there's this huge amount of life energy, because the child is just barely even born and they've got a whole 60, 70, 80 years of life in them. Next is a virgin, and then finally anybody.
And where do they get all these people from?
Well, some of them are homeless people. Some of them are prostitutes that don't know what they're getting themselves into. Some of them are people that are actually raised within the coven, kids that are born without having any, they don't have any documentation. They were born at home by, midwives and such, and then, they're just raised until they get to whatever age they want them to be, and then they're killed. And some of them are people that they kidnap, because they really, the hardcore Satanists really get off on the idea if they can find a Christian that they can kill, especially on certain high ritual days like Easter or Christmas. They love, if they can find somebody who's a professed Christian and kidnap them, they'll do it.
And were you ever involved in any of these, human murder rituals?
No, fortunately not. I was involved in some animal sacrifices. I think the worst I ever did was I sacrificed a hamster. But I still feel very bad about that because I think that's, very reprehensible. But no, thankfully Yahweh got me out of all that before I ever had to do something like that. But I know at the time I was moving in that direction. We'll talk more about that later.
Okay. Am I right that some Satanists like performing their rituals in rubbish dumps?
Well, yeah, there are some groups, and you see, it depends. This is very much like the Catholic Church, in that there's, the Catholic Church has masses where they say have purple vestments, and they have masses where they have red vestments, and they have masses where they have white vestments, and all this stuff means something, Well, similarly, if you're doing a certain kind of ritual and a certain kind of feast day, then some satanic groups are called neo-Gothic. And they're the ones that like to do it in old churches and have all these robes and incense and black candles and stuff like that, kind of like an old horror movie, like the movie, The Devil Rides Out or something. Now, on the other hand, the Satanists that are considered really hardcore Satanists will do things in, like what you're describing, where they will find some really ghastly place, a graveyard or a garbage dump, or something of that nature that's really disgusting, that smells awful, and there's like methane fires burning and all of this symbol of, this one outfit that I went to, they hung like dozens of dead dogs all over their chapel, just that were dead for like weeks. And flies and, buzzing, just smelled awful. But because again, see, Satan is the Lord of the Flies, Baal Zevub. So, it depends on what aspect of this they're trying to get at.
Please tell us about your experience on one of Saturn's moons.
Well, in the middle of being involved in all of this stuff, especially the satanic stuff, I'd gone home to visit my parents, who lived about 150 miles away in a little tiny farm town in Iowa from where we were living in Milwaukee. And the darndest thing happened. I was, for some reason, my wife, Sharon, had stayed behind us, so I was alone in my own bed. And I had this, at first I thought it was a dream. I dreamed that I had been taken out of the bed and just sort of levitated through the roof, and I was flying through space. And as I was flying along, I suddenly realized I was approaching the planet Saturn. And of course, Saturn is obviously the easiest planet to identify because of the rings. And then I got nearer, I realized I was going toward one of the moons. And as I got nearer to it, I saw that this moon was totally black. I mean, it barely reflected the light of the sun. It was like, kind of like a piece of charcoal. And as I got closer still, I saw this really ghastly looking, well, the only word I can describe it is obscenely Transudothian temple. I mean, it looked like nothing you've ever seen on Earth. Weird angles, kind of obscene, pustulant things sticking out of it that looked like tumors. Just really the closest thing, imagine if any of your viewers have ever been to the Denver airport. Imagine if you took the Denver airport and painted it black, flat black, and then covered it with tumors.
Could you just define Transuguthian for us for a sec?
Well, that's
For
a
those
term
who
that's
don't know?
used in black magic. It literally means trans-Plutonian. In other words, magic that comes from beyond our solar system.
Okay.
Yuggoth is the ancient name for the planet Pluto. And the term actually comes from the writings of H.P. Lovecraft, and we'll probably talk more about that later. But anyway, so this really bizarre-looking temple with strange, weird angles. And the walls of the temple, the only way to describe it is if anybody had seen the movie 2001, and the way the surface of the monolith, that black thing that shows up at the first, looks like a giant Hershey bar, that it was so black, no light would come out of it. It just looked like utter blackness. And I was led through the door of this thing, and inside was this guy who had been kind of my mentor in the Illuminati. And I don't know if at this point if it was a dream, if it was an astral projection, or if it was like an abduction or something, but he was standing there in this white robe glowing. And I knew him at that time as the Master M. And he said, or was it Master H? I can't even remember now at this point. Anyhow, he said, "Welcome to the Cathedral of Pain." That doesn't sound real good, but here I was standing there stark naked in the middle of outer space, and he led me into this big doors open, creak, just like the latest horror movie. And I walk into this giant cathedral. I mean, it's as big as any cathedral I've ever been in, except that the lighting was very somber. The architecture was very insane. And the only illumination came from the walls, but instead of stained glass windows, they had these giant glass walls that looked like an aquarium. Except that in the aquarium were floating all of these naked, mutilated, dead bodies of men, women, and children. And that kind of bluish light that comes out of an aquarium, and that was the only illumination except for some black tapers that were burning. And he instructed me to go and lay on this altar. And there was this altar that was shaped like a giant trapezoid, but it was made out of like weird, jagged, rusty-looking steel girders. And I was bound to this altar, and it wasn't looking real good by this time. I was getting kind of nervous because I didn't know if this was a nightmare or what it was. Because I'd had other kind of similar experiences like this, but none this horrible or this vivid. And all of a sudden, all these people came out, and they were all wearing black robes, and they all started chanting in French, oddly enough. And they started chanting all of these blasphemous things like, blaspheme God, hail Satan, spit on God, all of this stuff, cursed is God forever, things of that nature, just going on and on and on for an interminable amount of time. And I felt like I was freezing to death, and I felt power coursing through me. And all of a sudden there was this throne on the far end of the room, kind of like where the altar would be in a Catholic cathedral. And all of it was massive throne made out of steel girders, and over it was an inverted pentagram. And all of a sudden, this beam started appearing on the altar, like first just sort of a shimmering white light. And then it coalesced into this, first of all, it appeared like this almost angelic figure, beautiful, blonde-haired, really gorgeous male, and then all of a sudden it changed and became like this goat-headed, like goat of Mendes. And then it changed again, and it became like a winged bull. And it kept coruscating back and forth, like alternating, like faster than the eye could see between these two forms. And he rose from the chair, and this was a massive figure. I mean, it was easily 20 feet tall, and strode down to where I was laying on this altar. And he had these really long talons, like the talons are probably about this long. And I was laying there on my back, tied up. And he comes up to me, and he drove this talon into my forehead. And it just was like a searing, like red-hot poker of light, and it seemed to go right in to the middle of my cerebral cortex. And all these people are chanting all this blasphemous stuff in the background still. And he says, "Now you belong to me forever, body, soul, and spirit." And I felt this blinding white light fill my mind. And it was just like someone poured white-hot molten metal all over my brain. I've never known such pain in my life. And the next thing I knew, I was hurtling back to Earth like in this comet, in this fireball, faster than you can imagine. And, my head was still throbbing like a son of a gun. And all of a sudden, I came through the Earth's atmosphere and landed, blam, right in the backyard of my parents' house, just like. And oddly enough, the thing that came into my head, because I'd been studying at the seminary some time, and then I knew a little bit of the Bible, that one line where Yeshua says, "Behold, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven." And I thought of that, and I was literally laying there in this like small crater, literally in my backyard, with fire burning around me, just like I had landed from some kind of weird spaceship or other, you know. And so I staggered back. Fortunately, it was still like, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I staggered back into my room. My head just was, throbbing like I had the world's mother of all hangovers. And I went to bed, and I woke up, and it was all out of a dream, and I looked out, and there it was on the lawn, and my father and mother wondered what the heck happened to their lawn, and I had this scar on my forehead. So, that's the story of the moon of Saturn.
That is a unique story. Thank you for telling us.
And people ask, well, were you on drugs? I mean, I don't know. I'd certainly taken hallucinogenic drugs in the past, but no, I was not on any drugs.
The lawn hadn't taken drugs?
No, the lawn hadn't taken drugs. And I think it was some kind of genuine experience of it was basically my Luciferian initiation. Where I got enlightened, so to speak, but the light was the light of Lucifer. It was not the light of Yahweh.
And it was very painful.
Yes. Oh, yeah. It was I think, still the worst thing that's ever happened in my life in terms of physical pain.
Horrible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.